Hi there, my name is Jodie Flavel and I am the artist and owner of Decoris Vintage Designs. Welcome to my YouTube channel, and in today's painting video I am going to be showing you how to get this very rustic and chippy bohemian style look. So stay tuned for that. So when I started this look, I had a very stone kind of look in mind, and so that being said, I started by mixing sea spray with gravel road. I won't go too much into the sea spray right now because I do it almost every video. Sea spray is kind of my thing, but I will link a few videos down below where I show you how I mix my sea spray. So then I am using the new Le Petit brush by Dixie Belle, which is due for the release very soon, and I am just stippling this on to my cabinet just as so I get a very textured base coat. So this is one of those videos where I hesitate to call it a tutorial because I go through lots of different processes and techniques, so hopefully you'll learn a few techniques from this, but this is one of those crazy times where I have one idea and then end up with a totally different look. So continuing on with the stone look that I had in mind at this point, I then moved in with a little bit of sandbar. This also had sea spray in it, and I am using a chip brush to apply it this time. The reason I'm applying a chip brush is because the bristles are very sparse, which creates a lot of texture, and I am also not 100% covering this piece. I am making sure that some of the gravel road is still peeking through underneath. What I have here is some apricot that I have watered down in a 50/50 solution. It doesn't really matter what brush you apply it with. I'm making sure it's very watery and drippy, and also making sure I have some kitchen towel or a rag on hand just to give it a pat. At this point I have no idea what it is that I realised I didn't want to do the stone look, and I have no idea where I'm going with this. Here I am using Rustic red, and just using the exact same technique. I've watered it down and I'm patting, and then I come in with some watered down chocolate and just put this around the edges just to kind of frame this piece and give it a little bit of depth. I worked on the left hand side beforehand, which you can probably see, it's looking totally different, and I just decided to maybe have a little go on one of the other doors before I actually filmed what I was doing, so it's a little bit more coherent for you guys. But what I am doing is just at this point it's probably a little bit nonsensical really. I don't really think this had any bearing on the finished look. Alright, so what I have here now is some Mermaid Tail. It isn't watered down in any way, and it doesn't really massively matter what brush you use. I'm just using one of the premium chip brushes again from Dixie Belle, and I'm focusing on putting the Mermaid Tail around the edges. I am then coming in with some Midnight Sky, which is a blue-black, and I am putting this around the very edge of the piece, basically just to add some depth and to create a sort of a vision of a vignette, and I'm going to roughly blend that into my Mermaid Tail. And then finally what I do is get some sandbar, and I'm putting this in the middle there in the panels just to highlight those panels, and you know, again just to create some depth to this piece. So because I didn't water this down and I still want a little bit of texture, I am now spraying it with water, grabbing my kitchen towel, and I'm using my kitchen towel to actually blend the colours together. This technique is called ragging, and it's a technique that I do on many of my pieces, and this just creates, you know, the kitchen towel or the rag, as you tap it, it will create some very interesting things and texture. So just moving on to the drawer now, I am going to follow the exact same process as below. I'm using my Mermaid Tail as my main colour, that is my middle colour. I am then coming in with some sandbar there in the middle just to create some highlighting, And then around the edges I will be using Midnight Sky for a little bit of depth. And because I know this is going to be a rustic look, I mean, you can even see the texture underneath there from the sea spray. Remember, the sea spray is still on here. I'm not going overly concerned about perfect blending because it's going to be a very, very watery bohemian style. So this is where things start going a little bit askew again, and I'm thinking, and I'm changing things up again and not necessarily liking what I'm doing. So with a chip brush, I now have some sandbar and some Rebel Yellow. I'm popping the Rebel Yellow there and stippling it into the middle, and I'm putting on some sandbar around those edges. I don't really know, I think I'm just playing here. I have no actual set process in mind. I think at this point I just wanted the draw to be very, very light compared to the rest of the piece, just to create some different things and different character. And then I'm coming in with some Antebellum Blue, and this is watered down Antebellum Blue, and I am blending that into the lighter colours there in the drawer. So I decided that the door panels were not quite highlighted enough for me, so coming in with my sandbar again. And I know it looks very, very white here, but that is only because of the darker colours and vibrant colours around it. But I'm coming in with some more sandbar, and I'm just blending this. I'm just playing here. I'm just trying different colours, different techniques, different watered down paints, and I'm just trying to figure out what's working. My look is always very, very layered. I really love those layered looks, and you know, sometimes to get this, it's just a case of playing and seeing what works. And sometimes you add a few layers, and it may, like for here for instance, like I already have done, and maybe it doesn't work, so then you add a few more layers and you change things up until, you know, you're finally happy with what's going on. So I thought to myself, okay, if this is going to be another watery style look, or you know, very bohemian, then there definitely needs to be some more colours happening here. So what I decided to do was bring in some Tree Frog Green. Tree Frog Green is probably Dixie Belle's most vibrant kind of bright green, and it's really it's a perfect colour for enhancing. And so what I am doing is I am dry brushing this around some of the edges. I'm using a dry chip brush, nothing special, and I'm just highlighting here. I'm just adding some more dimension to this piece, some more colours to make it look even more aged, focusing mostly at the bottom of the drawers there, and as I say, around the outer edges, and focusing on the pull area as well on the doors. So this part was filmed live, and I decided just to edit it down for you guys, just to make it a little bit easier to digest. What I have is a palette knife, just a cheap palette knife from my local, you know, pound shop or somewhere like that. I have some Rusty Nail, which is a lovely, it's a colour that really contrasts well against the blues and greens, so this will create some drama. And I am basically then just scraping it down at the top of the panels there, and then spritzing with water just to create some drippiness. So if you think about the colour wheel, I know I mentioned this a lot, but basically orange and reds are on the opposite end to blues and greens. So whenever you put those two colours together, there's always a bit of drama, but it has to be done very carefully, I think, because otherwise it can just look a bit crazy. So here at the moment it is looking very, very stark. But what I will do is I will then just, once it is dry, I will just wipe it a little bit with a baby wipe or a damp rag, and then I will just soften that up just to make it look more like it's integrated with the rest of the piece, rather than just being boom and then just having a lot of orange there. So now I have some pearlescent glaze. I'm using the mini brush, and I'm just putting this where the lighter colours are on this piece. So with the pearlescent glaze, we'll just add a little bit of a sheen to this and a little bit of a glow. So if you think of old, I'm trying to think, but if you think of old stone or marble, and you know, just things that have been really buffed out, I'm trying to sort of give that impression by using the glaze there. So next up is some copper patina paint. So I'm not even sure if you can get this in the UK. You definitely can't get the activation spray in the UK, because normally you can use this paint, and then there is a spray that you use to make it rust. But it is a fantastic metallic in its own right, because it is a true copper colour. So I have an artist brush, and I am basically putting this on all of the hardware, and I am letting it drip to give the impression that the hardware may have once been copper, and you know, something's happened over time. It's weather's got to it, rain's got to it, oxygen over time's got to it, and it has just become worn and drippy, and it's just lovely and rustic. So now going back to the panels, I have some cobalt blue. I am using my palette knife again, and I'm scraping the cobalt blue upwards and then just giving it a pat just to soften it up. Like with the rusty nail, I will, once this is dried, I will go in there with a baby wipe and just very gently wipe this down a little bit, just to soften the colours up and to make it less in your face. Alright guys, let me show you something that's happened. So I left this overnight, and obviously yesterday I put the copper patina paint on it and I sprayed it with water, and I've come back today and it's actually sort of rusted, can you see? And I don't know how, I don't know why, because normally, to rust something it normally needs, I think, I'm going to be nerdy now, but I think, what is it? Is it oxidization? The process of rust? Is that what it's called? And usually it needs some sodium, at least, or some salt to at least start the ball rolling. So I'm thinking, for some reason, somehow, there must be some saltiness in the air here in my, my new workshop or something. There's obviously something in the air here that has, or maybe it's a moisture here. Maybe it's a condensation. I don't know. The sodium in the condensation. Maybe, I don't know. I'm just trying to figure it out. But yeah, it's really cool. It's rusted, and that's great because I can't get the activation spray here, so that was a nice little surprise today. Alright, so you guys are always interested in what I do with the top, and sometimes I like to leave it bare wood and sometimes I like to paint it. So what I'm doing here is I have my sander. It's just a cheap sander, it's actually not very good at all. It does the job, but yeah, so I'm not using anything fancy. It's just one I got off Amazon, and I'm using some 120 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to sand off the paint off those edges, and I'm going to try and take this down to the grain to see if the wood looks good enough without having to paint it. Unfortunately it didn't, so what I decided to do then was stain this. So I'm using Dixie Belle's Voodoo gel stains, which is a water-based gel stain, and I am using Temptress, which is a lovely turquoise stain. I have my Gator Hide sponge because I do have applicator pads, they're easy to use, but the sponge is fine as well if you don't have them to hand. And I'm just squirting that on top, and then I'm just going to rub that into the piece. I did use 3 layers of the Temptress just to get really good coverage. The reason why I prefer using this to chalk paint sometimes is just because it sort of adheres and soaks into the wood a little bit better, especially for the top, which is a high traffic area, and I just feel like it's a little bit safer that way. I decided I wanted to apply a little bit more contrast to this piece, so I grabbed my French tip brush. Again, it doesn't really matter which brush you use. This is a very textured, natural bristled brush, but it's not massively important as long as it's dry. So I also have my rusty nail, which is the orangey brown kind of red colour that I used earlier, and I am applying this mostly around the edges. So I'm trying to think again of rust, and I'm trying to think of something that maybe was once blue and copper, and you can often see things that have had some copper in them turn sort of green or orange, and I'm just trying to think of the patinas that I've seen in the past. And so I'm going to use this just to add a little bit more depth and character to this piece, and just to make it look a little bit more boho and interesting. Next up, I decided to distress this piece. So remember in the beginning when we used that sea spray and there was that layer of sandbar? So what I'm doing is I have my palette knife and I am basically scraping that top layer of paint off to reveal some of that very textured sandbar underneath. As this is happening as well, it is causing all of the paint to come off and allowing some of the wood to show, and for me this is a very natural way to create a distressed look. So I'm actually not a big fan of sanding to create distressed looks unless it is just to create a soft kind of look, because I feel like when you sand it's not random, it becomes manufactured in a sense, but because with the palette knife it becomes very chippy and you have no control over where, you know, the chips happen and how big that kind of chip is as well. So moving back to the top, it is all now dry and I'm coming in with my rusty nail again and plenty of water, and I am pulling that from the edges and towards the middle of the top of the piece. So I decided to drag my palette knife down to create, you know, some chips and to distress this, but then something very cool happened. So what happened was the very watery rusty nail on top, as I pulled my palette knife down, actually showed the wood grain underneath as though I was tracing the top of it. And I just thought that was quite cool that that happened. If you don't have that ability, you can always use the wood grain tool as well. Alright, and now it's time to finish this piece up and get it sealed. So what I have here is just some Best Dang wax in clear. I'm just going to do a very simple finish on this, and I am applying the wax everywhere. I am then going to come in with my Belle brush by Dixie Belle, which I love to use for dark waxes because I think it gives me good control. And then I simply just put a little bit of black wax around the edges for some depth, and voila, you have a very rustic finished look. I had lots of fun creating this, and if you guys enjoyed this video, it will really help me out if you drop a comment below, let me know your thoughts, and also switch on those notifications which will let you know every time that I post a video. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a lovely day. Bye bye.